Hello and welcome back to the channel. I think when most people think about Robotech, they probably remember Rick Hunter flying his Veritech Fighter, the SDF-1 battling the giant Zentraedi, and one huge continuous space war going on for generations. But the plot twist is that Robotech was never just a single show. Unlike a normal anime dub, Harmony Gold created it by combining 3 completely unrelated Japanese anime into a single 85-episode saga. For this video though, we're going to be focusing only on the first part, the Macross Saga, which was adapted from Super Dimension Fortress Macross. Even then, it wasn't just translated, characters were renamed, dialogue was rewritten, an entirely new mythology was invented, emotional scenes were changed, and even the context of the ending played out differently. So today, let's break down the 12 biggest differences between Robotech and Macross. It's going to be a good one, so let's get right into it. Robotech is actually 3 unrelated anime, not 1. Maybe the biggest thing that confuses people about Robotech is the fact that it was presented as an English adaptation of Super Dimension Fortress Macross. However, while the first 36 episodes were adapted from Macross, episode 37 onward was not a continuation, but rather it came from a different source material that was completely unrelated. Unlike most anime that were localized, Robotech was not a localized version of a single anime, but 3 different anime combined to create one story, Robotech. The 3 anime that were combined, in order, were Super Dimension Fortress Macross, Super Dimension Cavalry Southern Cross, and Genesis Climber Mospedia. The main thing these anime have in common is that they're sci-fi mecha series, because aside from that, their stories, characters, antagonists, and settings are completely different. Southern Cross and Mospedia were originally intended to be completely unrelated to Macross and existed separately in the Japanese market. In fact, for Japanese audiences, they are 3 completely different anime that just happened to be combined for the English dubbed version. Robotech was produced by Harmony Gold USA in association with Tatsunoko Production, from which Harmony Gold licensed all 3 anime. Because Macross only had 36 episodes, it didn't meet the episode requirements commonly expected for weekday television syndication in the United States. Harmony Gold therefore added Southern Cross and Mospedia to create an 85-episode series. Many of the scripts were altered, and even the narrator's monologues were changed to fit a different context in order to merge the 3 completely different stories into one. The resultant series depicted 3 different wars, with 3 different sets of heroes and 3 different kinds of mecha, but made them seem like parts of one larger story arc. This arrangement also contributed to complicated copyright and licensing disputes involving Tatsunoko Production, Harmony Gold, Big West, and Studio Nue. These disputes affected the international distribution of Macross for decades and had lasting consequences for the companies involved. An entire mythology was invented to connect them. Once Harmony Gold decided to unite 3 completely different anime into one, it faced a major challenge. Each of the 3 shows had its own plot, lore, and nuance that had little in common apart from mechs and space travel. Dubbing the episodes would not be enough to make viewers understand why these 3 different stories were now merged. Therefore, the company had to come up with an original concept that would somehow tie all the existing plots, lores, and sources of power together. The most plausible idea was to introduce a new energy source with unique capabilities called protoculture. In Robotech, protoculture is an incredibly powerful energy source derived from the flower of life and developed by the scientist Zor. According to lore created for Robotech, this energy source powers much of the franchise's advanced technology. The resource is so valuable and desirable that entire civilizations are willing to go to war over it. Thus, Harmony Gold managed to intertwine the existing plots and make protoculture the central point of the newly created Robotech universe. With protoculture, the creators made the Zentraedi a race of warriors serving the Robotech masters, while the latter became the ones who desired protoculture and sought to control it. Then, the Invid arrived on the scene, also seeking the Flower of Life, resulting in 3 different wars. This way, Harmony Gold united 3 different conflicts and made viewers watch one continuous saga. By contrast, Macross didn't have to worry about unifying different plots and concepts because there was no need for that. The creators explained alien technology, transformable spacecraft, and advanced propulsion systems through over-technology, or OT, a term referring to alien tech that humanity managed to obtain and reverse engineer. Macross's creators used the concept to explain why humans had access to such powerful and sophisticated technology after the ASS-1 spaceship crashed on Earth. However, they didn't make OT the central point of the Macross Saga or tie different sources of power together. Additionally, protoculture has a completely different meaning in Macross. Rather than being an energy source, it refers to the ancient civilization responsible for creating humanity and the Zentraedi. Thus, when Harmony Gold redefined protoculture as the guiding force of Robotech, it significantly changed the lore of the new series. Character names and nationalities were changed. One of the first things longtime fans might notice about Macross and Robotech is that the characters' names were changed in several cases. Unlike a straightforward dub that would simply replace the voices of the Japanese actors with English ones while keeping the original names, Harmony Gold changed both the voices and many of the names to Western equivalents. It's also worth noting that these changes made the cultural identity of Macross less distinctly Japanese for Western audiences. While most of Robotech's characters remain similar to their Japanese originals in terms of personality and physical appearance, the fact that many of them did not retain their original names makes the adaptation feel like a different piece of media from the version released in Japan. The character whose name was changed most significantly, and whose name was probably the most recognizable among Macross characters, is the protagonist. In the original, he was named Hikaru Ichijio, while in Robotech, he's given the name Rick Hunter. Similarly, his commander, Misa Hayase, was renamed Lisa Hayes. Hayao Kakizaki actually became Ben Dixon. In some cases, the characters' first names were kept. Roy Fokker retained his full name, while Maximilian Genius became Max Sterling. It was apparent that the creators of Robotech wanted many of the English names to be clearly different from the originals. The changes made to the characters' names affected not only the perception of the characters themselves, but also the cultural context in which they were presented. Macross depicts a multinational military organization, but its Japanese origins are far more visible than they are in Robotech. The use of westernized names helped to make Robotech feel more familiar to its intended American audience. Such changes were common in localized Japanese cartoons and television shows at the time, as characters' names were often changed to match the language and culture of the dubbed version. However, many viewers who watched Robotech were unaware that they were watching a significantly altered adaptation of Macross. In all likelihood, many didn't suspect that changes of this scale had been made to the show they were watching. Unspoken feelings became explicit declarations. Although Macross and Robotech feature largely the same animation during the Macross Saga, the dialogue in the two versions differs in several ways. One of the significant differences is the tendency towards explicitness in Robotech that's not always present in Macross. Macross often depicts emotions through actions, pauses, and implied meanings. Viewers are frequently expected to understand the characters' feelings through their body language, behavior, and the context of their conversations. By contrast, Harmony Gold often made these feelings clearer by having characters directly explain what they wanted or what they believed another character was trying to say. This approach made the characters' intentions and relationships easier to understand, but it also changed the subtlety of certain scenes. An example can be found in the episodes surrounding Roy Fokker's death. While both visions depict the same tragic event, rewritten dialogue and added narration make some of the emotional context more direct in Robotech. Although the two versions use the same basic animation, their dialogue differs enough to alter the presentation of relationships between the characters. While emotions in Macross are often implied, Robotech frequently states them explicitly. This may not appear to be a major difference at first, but it changes how viewers interpret the characters and their relationships. The score was completely overhauled. Although most viewers talk about the changes in the script and plot, one of the biggest differences between Macross and Robotech is something that can be easily overlooked: the music. Harmony Gold didn't retain most of the original Japanese score, instead replacing it with newly composed music. Because of that, many scenes shared by the two series sound notably different. For Robotech, the music is especially important because it helps define many scenes and creates a particular atmosphere around them. Therefore, when looking closely at similar situations in Robotech and Macross, one might realize that the different music causes the scenes to be perceived in completely different ways. Compared to Robotech, Macross often uses background music more sparingly. Some Macross scenes are filled with tense conversations between characters, with music used selectively to emphasize particular moments. In Robotech, dramatic pieces are frequently used to underline events and enhance their impact on the viewer. There are specific tracks in Robotech associated with particular characters, battles, or emotional situations. Moreover, there are specially composed songs, such as We Will Win, that are performed within the series and add another layer of emotion to the story and its characters. Therefore, Robotech rarely allows a scene to pass without music or sound effects emphasizing the narrative tension. Macross, by comparison, sometimes relies more heavily on dialogue, silence, and sound effects to create dramatic impact. Many scenes in the original series have less accompanying music, allowing the dialogue and performances to convey the emotion. When people think about the differences between Robotech and the original Macross series, the changes in script and plot usually come to mind first. However, the music is also a notable difference, and by changing the score, Harmony Gold significantly altered the overall feel of the series. The added dramatic pieces changed the mood and tone of certain scenes, making them happier, sadder, more dramatic, or even more intense, especially during battle. Violence and death were softened for broadcast. Another substantial difference between the original Macross and Robotech was created not for narrative purposes, but because of American television standards and the adaptation's younger target audience. More specifically, the American distributors of Robotech felt that some of the nudity and sexual content depicted in the original Japanese version was unsuitable for younger viewers. Therefore, Harmony Gold had to edit several scenes from Macross for American syndication. It's important to note that the producers didn't remove the wartime atmosphere of the series or avoid the subject of death. Instead, select shots involving blood, injuries, nudity, or material considered inappropriate for syndicated television were shortened, altered, or outright removed when necessary. Scenes containing sexual content were treated similarly. Although the original Macross did not contain extensive nudity, several moments depicted partial nudity in a humorous context or contained sexual innuendo that the American distributors considered inappropriate. These scenes were edited in the Robotech version. Because of these changes, Robotech remained more violent and adult-oriented than many American cartoons of the time, which often avoided the themes of war and its consequences. Although Robotech was edited to make certain moments less graphic, it retained its darker atmosphere because of its wartime setting and willingness to address death. Additional narration changed the context of many scenes. For much of the Macross Saga, Robotech follows the basic sequence of events from its Japanese predecessor. Similar battles occur in the same order, character arcs are broadly comparable, and the war's outcome is nearly identical. However, the addition of extensive narration changes the way many of those events are explained. Macross generally allows viewers to understand developments through the characters' dialogue, actions, and visual storytelling. Robotech frequently adds narration to explain military decisions, alien technology, protoculture, and the connections between events. This narration was especially important because Harmony Gold needed the Macross Saga to establish concepts that would later connect it with Southern Cross and Mospeda. The changes become especially noticeable near the end of the saga. Both versions depict Chiron, known as Comjin in Macross, launching a final suicide attack that destroys the SDF-1 and kills Captain Gloval, Claudia, Vanessa, Kim, and Sammy while Lisa survives. Robotech doesn't invent different fates for these characters, but its rewritten dialogue and narration place the attack within the larger Robotech mythology. As such, the added narration does more than explain what's happening on screen. It changes the context of the same animation and helps transform a self-contained ending into the conclusion of the first chapter of a much longer saga. Sexual tension that existed in Macross was softened. While Macross is famous for its space battles, the series also portrays adult relationships in a nuanced manner. Although Macross incorporates elements of love and sexuality, these are presented as part of the show's more mature tone. Thus, Macross portrayed human relationships in a way intended to appeal to a broad audience. Robotech, however, was designed to be suitable for younger American television audiences, and it changed several romance and sexuality-oriented scenes into more innocent ones. The relationship dynamics between the Zentraedi and humans were some of the most unique aspects of Macross. The first romantic relationships between the two groups involved human men and Zentraedi women. For the Zentraedi, concepts such as romantic love, music, and family life were unfamiliar. Their relationships with humans acted as a way for them to become acquainted with culture. In Robotech, many aspects of these relationships were changed, softened, or made less explicit. Moreover, the relationship dynamics between the Zentraedi and humans were presented within the broader idea of the Zentraedi learning about human society and culture as a whole. Even though Robotech changed many aspects of the original series, it retained its major themes. Although Robotech made the series less adult-oriented and removed some of its nuance, it still kept the unique concept of relationships between humans and Zentraedi. This allowed Robotech to depict the Zentraedi learning about different aspects of human society. Several companies fought over who owned the story. The creation of Robotech was not only a major step in the international exposure of Macross, it also contributed to one of the longest and most complicated licensing disputes in anime history. The events began in 1984 when Harmony Gold acquired the rights to Super Dimension Fortress Macross through Tatsunoko Production. A year later, in 1985, Robotech was presented to American viewers for the first time. The later disputes involved the different rights held by Tatsunoko Production, Big West, Studio Nue, and Harmony Gold. Big West and Studio Nue asserted ownership of original characters and mecha designs, while Tatsunoko held rights connected to the production and international licensing of the original TV series. Japanese court decisions in the early 2000s clarified that Big West owned the copyrights to many of the original character and mecha designs, while Tatsunoko held copyright interests in the animated television production. However, the division of rights remained complicated. The conflict had significant consequences, contributing to the prolonged difficulty of distributing and localizing later Macross productions outside of Japan. Meanwhile, Harmony Gold continued developing the Robotech franchise, leading Macross and Robotech to evolve separately. The licensing dispute lasted for decades, beginning with Harmony Gold's decision to combine 3 anime into a single TV series for American screens. As it turned out, that decision had far-reaching consequences for the future of both the Macross and Robotech franchises. The uncut original wasn't widely available in English for nearly 20 years. For many Western fans, Robotech was Macross. For years, the Robotech series, following the adventures of Rick Hunter, Lisa Hayes, and the SDF-1, was the primary way the Macross story was presented to English-speaking viewers. Despite the massive number of changes made to it, Robotech was considered by many fans to be the only way to experience Macross. The original Super Dimension Fortress Macross was difficult for English-speaking viewers to access legally for years, and fans who managed to watch it often did so through unofficial subtitled tapes, imported recordings, or fan distributions. Thus, those who knew about Macross beyond the Robotech series were significantly fewer in number than those who watched Rick Hunter and Lisa Hayes. Although an official English subtitled release appeared in North America during the 1990s, complete official English-language home video releases became more accessible in the 2000s. This meant that those who had watched the series as Robotech had relatively few opportunities to compare the two versions. The differences were significant, including character names, dialogue, music, narration, and story elements. As a result, Macross's limited availability in English and the existence of Robotech, with its large fan base, affected how the original series was perceived outside of Japan. A 2021 deal ended decades of legal disputes, but the original series is still tangled up. After decades, Big West, Studio Nue, and Harmony Gold announced an agreement in April 2021 concerning Macross and Robotech licenses, significantly affecting the franchise's international distribution. The agreement allowed the immediate international distribution of most Macross television sequels and films. It also affirmed Harmony Gold's rights to the Robotech franchise and established cooperation concerning the international distribution of future Macross and Robotech projects. The agreement recognized Harmony Gold's long-standing license through Tatsunoko Production concerning the original 1982 Macross series and the use of 41 Macross characters and mecha within the Robotech television series and related merchandise outside of Japan. As a result, the agreement addressed many of the issues concerning the international distribution of Macross and Robotech, and although it resolved major disagreements among the companies, the licensing history of the original 1982 Macross series remains complicated because different rights are held by different companies. Robotech turned one war into three, the original Macross told one. Probably the most apparent difference between Robotech and the original Super Dimension Fortress Macross is the scale. Unlike the original Macross series, which focused on the conflict between the humans and the Zentraedi, Robotech tells a more comprehensive story, and it includes 3 Robotech wars. On the other hand, the original Macross series' plot is directly linked to one major conflict that begins after the mysterious spaceship crashes on Earth in 1999 and develops into the war between humans and the Zentraedi. Although the main war ends before the final episode, the remaining episodes explore its aftermath and the challenges of coexistence. In the end, the main plot is driven home that the conflict between the two civilizations becomes a story of mutual discovery. Thus, it is possible to conclude that the major difference between Robotech and the original Macross series is scale. The latter focuses on one major war between humans and the Zentraedi, while Robotech covers much broader events, including the 3 Robotech wars. After all these differences, the biggest thing that separates Macross and Robotech is that they were never really telling the same story at all. Macross was always a complete, self-contained 36-episode Japanese series about a love triangle, human culture, and an alien war, while Robotech transformed that story into the beginning of a much larger 85-episode saga by connecting it with 2 completely unrelated anime. Unlike adaptations that simply censor or simplify an original, Robotech ended up creating an entirely new continuity that never existed in Japan. So, if you grew up believing Robotech was always one continuous story, discovering that Macross, Southern Cross, and Mospeda were never connected might just be the biggest twist of all. That said, we'd love to hear from you. Which of these differences surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments down below, and thanks for watching. We'll see ya in the next one.